Greetings, 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 greetings. It is I, King Clifford Jefferson, a senator of Godfrey, the fifth kind of man Jew, son of folk who love Jerusalem. I am the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, which we know here at the Third Temple English Church of England as King Edgar the Peaceful. It is August the 24th, which is equivalent to the Berber year 2974. Once again, it is August 24th, 2024, which is equivalent to the Berber year 2024. I greet you in the name of the elders. I greet you in the name of the saints. I greet you in the name of all those who are predecessors of the Anglo-Saxon Berbers. Once again, of the Anglo-Saxon Berbers. This is part two, The Legend of King Arthur, Glastonbury Abbey, the Christ Church, the Plantagenet Legacy. Once again, part two of the legacy of King Arthur, the legends of King Arthur, Glastonbury, Christ Church, which is a Plantagenet legacy. I could not go further without giving the honor and a shout out to my queen, Sister Galveston, from the House of Galveston. Also want to give a shout out to Brother Milligan, Countess Middleton for their donations. It was well appreciated. I'm gonna give honor to my Archbishop Belmont from the House of Belmont, who's constantly doing this work. All right, keeping the website up. And once again, this lesson is part two. The Legends of King Arthur, Glastonbury Abbey, Christ Church, a Plantagenet Legacy. It's pretty much what we talked about yesterday, but more compiled. Okay? You're gonna hear a lot of information today. All right. Before we even get into that, let's go through our ceremony song. All right, which each and every one of us should know it by way of um, remembering it. But I'm gonna go over it. I'm gonna sing it for you, so it could be sung like it's supposed to. All right. So everyone, wait a minute, let me pull it up. For some reason I'm very tired today, but nonetheless, I'm gonna continue on. As well, I would like to everyone refer to me not as king, but as my lord. All right. So the way to address the king from this day forward is my lord. Greetings, 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 brother Cornier from the House of Cornier. Cornier, glad he was able to join us today. No problem, brother. No problem. All right. This is our song. I'm going to sing it for you. And even if you can't sing, you're obligated to know it and sing it when the time comes. All right? So here it is. Return of the King. There comes a time in the tales of men that the world knows very well. But to them that the story is told about forever remains a tale. 6,000 years has come and gone, and man is none the wise. The hour has come as fate has told, what follow is man devised. Return of the King, return of the King, make way, make way, make way. Return of the King, return of the King, wherever where he may reign. Time waits for no one, but everyone subject to time. From tales of God to tales of men, therein your answer will lie. Return of the King, return of the King, make way, make way, make way. Return of the King, return of the King, forever he may reign. Time waits for no one, 'cause everyone's subject to time. From tales of God to tales of men, therein your answer will find. So that's our hymn. I'll sing it every day, and you are responsible for singing it as well with me in your own homes. So when we come together on that first day of the temple, we can also sing it together in harmony. This is going to be such a beautiful lesson. I'm glad to have the privilege to be able to teach this lesson. And what's beautiful about it is that the narrative that I got is pretty much from University of Pennsylvania. And it's very important to understand how gifted I am in interpreting this information as a result of how I'm going to explain it, contrast to how those who have it in their possession explain that, as we know of in this day and time, as the MS or the manuscript roll 1060. The MS roll 1060, which is the manuscript roll. Okay, so once again, I wanted to give honor to our ancestors. All right, to the melanated deities that existed. All right. Also, I need everyone here today to pay very close attention to the parties that are in play today, because in my last lecture I talked about King Arthur. Okay, and King Arthur was a story narrated by Godfrey of Monmouth. Okay, it's narrated by Godfrey of Monmouth, which is a Welshman. So that means that he grew up in Britain. He was born in Britain. So you need to pay close attention, not just to the words that I say, all right, but how I say them, and the way I line them up, because I got a whole lineup here of boxes. Some were open yesterday, majority of them are not, but they're very paramount today for your understanding of how this lesson is to unfold exactly like that scroll. Okay? I'm going to go through the scroll. I'm going to let them interpret the scroll. And then I'm going to go through the scroll along with them. I'm going to stop and give a narrative of the things that they missed in the scroll that are important to us as Anglo-Saxon Berbers, that apparently they miss as scholars and doctors. Okay? So if you watched yesterday's lecture, you're going to love this one. Okay? We're going to go all the way back to Adam and Eve. What's important about this song of Return of the King, because I made it for in lieu of what we call the age of the Messiah, which the Messiah means the anointed one. Pretty much everything we're talking about today was explained yesterday about the Messiah and about what the Messiah means and about who the Messiah was and the purpose for the Messiah. Okay? But in this hymn, it says 6,000 years has come and gone, and man is none the wise. Hence that word wise, wise men. The hour has come as fate has told. What's followed is man's demise. 6,000 years has come and gone, and man is none the wise, meaning now. The hour has come, has fate has told. What's followed is man's demise. Okay? Very important for understand. Focus point is 6,000 years. Why? Let's go to 6,000 years. 6,000 years. We can go back to 6,000 years. We talked about this yesterday. A lot of us are, for lack of a better word, are slow. Okay? If you cannot understand what it is that I am revealing to you today about me actually being that Messiah, all right, that they refer to as Jesus Christ, all right, who was in fact and indeed the Lord and Savior, okay? So listen to the mathematics. According to the classical Jewish sources, the Hebrew year or the Hebrew calendar marks the latest time for the initiation of the Messianic age. We know the word Messiah, Messianic means the anointed one. We know the word Messiah means the one who's able to deliver people. That's what the word Messiah means. When you look it up, the word Messiah means one who is able to um, liberate his people. That's what a Messiah is. The Talmud, the Midrash, and the Zohar specify that the date by which the Messiah are the ones who are anointed, who are supposed to liberate their people, all right, by returning the church back to its original state, will appear in the 6,000 years from creation. Okay? 6,000 years from creation. According to tradition, not historical facts, but tradition, very important. The Hebrew calendar started at the time of creation, placed at 3,761 BC, which means before the Christian era. So there was no Christianity at this particular time, the way it's portrayed nowadays, which came about by way of the conversion of the Anglo-Saxon Berbers into the Christianity that you have now. So the year 3761 was the time of creation. It says the current year we have now, from 2023 and 2024, the Hebrew year is actually the year 5784. Because then the Gregorian year is the year 2024. But the equivalent year to that in the Hebrew year is 5784. Berber, B-E-R-B-E-R, not B-A-R-B-E-R. B-E-R-B-E-R. So according to the Hebrew calendar, starting at creation at 3761 BCE, which we know, as you said, is the Berber calendar, all right? Because in the Berber calendar, 3761, we already on the planet, okay? But BCE don't stand for the Berber calendar, according to those who are telling the story, because these are Hebrews, okay? These are Hebrews telling the story. And they say the current 2024 Hebrew year is 5784. So from the time of creation to this year, 2024, which is equivalent to the Hebrew year 5784. No problem. Okay? So the year 2024, which is the year we have now, and the Hebrews, for the Hebrews, it's the year 5784. And I bet the Hebrews right now don't even know that. By this calculation, this start of the 6,000 year would occur at nightfall of the 29th September 20, 2239 and end with a cure at the nightfall of 16th September 2240 on the Gregorian calendar. And the year 2020, 2240 is actually time of Edward the First in the Berber year. Okay? You look up to 2240 part cell. Year 2240 is actually the time of Edward the First on the Gregorian calendar. Okay? Once again, the year 2240 on the Gregorian calendar is actually the time of Edward the First when he was ruling. Okay? Which is, we know at that, matter of fact, just pull it up. I like to show people. All right. 2240. Let's see, how did I make that connection? Uh, what was it, 98 AD? Let me see. What year would it be to make it 2240? Give me a second, I'm thinking. Oh, okay. 198 year. If it's not it, I'm going to move forward. No, I'm wrong. I forgot how I got to 2240, but we can get to it another time. I did it in previous lectures. I don't have time to do it today for the sake of the lesson. Okay. So let's go back to where I was. All right, 6,000 years. The 6,000 years, creation will be 3761 BCE. All right, this is when Adam and Eve were created. The year 3761. Because according to people's story, there's things that are happening at the same parallel time. So you got the Hebrews existing, you got the Rome existing, you got everybody's got their calendar with a so-called story that they claim to exist. So if you claim to exist for anybody who claims to be of a culture or nationality, you must have a calendar. Because in the year 2024 is equivalent to the Berber year 2974. Because we don't use the Gregorian year. All right. It's very, very important for you to comprehend that. So in the year 1 BC, in the Gregorian year, the actual year and the Hebrew year is 3761 BC. And the Berber year is actually 950. Let's see. Let's go there. 1 BC. And the Gregorian year is 1 BC. Rome came about in 753 BC. But in 753 BC, it's the time of what we call the 22nd dynasty of the West Libyan Berbers. Okay? So Libyan Berbers are existed at this time in the 8th century, okay, BC. Libyan Berbers, I repeat, this is the time of the Bronze Age coming into what we call the Iron Age. All right? We must comprehend that. But the year 753, when it's the Berber year, It's the same time that Romans and Remius is actually or coming to in existence. Okay, and 753 is parallel to 1 BC, which is in the Berber year. Our calendar is actually 950, and there is no English king on this list. So we know that whatever going on in Britain, all right, which will be discussed today, is all concerning Berbers, okay? Because there is no English king, all right? We are identified as Anglo-Saxon Berbers, pretty much what the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica has stated. And the Hebrew calendar is the year 3761, which means that creation story is just happening. So that means that the Berbers, which is the year 950 BC, okay, the year 950 BC, if the year apart from 950 BC, 950 AD, because you have 1 BC, all right? That means that this is the time of King Edgar the Peaceful, our Jesus Christ, all right? So the Hebrew year 3760 or 3761 will be the year for the Berbers at that time, 950 AD, which will be for the Gregorian, those who follow or came about with Pope Gregory the 13th when they converted all the Anglo-Saxon Berbers to Christianity. The time would be 1 BC, which is called Ab Urbe Conditiona, the founding of the city. Okay, the founding of the city. But the Berber calendar, going back to 753, will be the 22nd dynasty. And we see the topic that's going on in 1 BC concerns the birth of Jesus. All right. It's very important that you understand that, especially when we're making reference to religion of Christianity. Okay. All right. It says that as assigned by Dionysius, if I'm pronouncing his name, please forgive me, Exiguus, in his Endless Dominio era, according to most scholars, Dionysius used the word incarnation, but it is not known whether he meant conception or birth. However, at least one scholar thinks Dionysius placed the incarnation of Jesus in the next year, AD 1. So that means that the year, according to the Berber calendar, in AD 1, if we go to AD in the Gregorian calendar, would be the year 951. Because you go from 1 BC, the year 0, to AD 1. So just hit 1 AD before we move on with the lesson, and the Berber year it will be 951. So the calendar is going up instead of going down. Okay, which in the Hebrew year it would be, as we see, 3761, 3762. As we see, the calendar is going up. All right, very, very important. But we see there is no English read now year. Okay? There is no English read now year. Why is this important? Okay. Creation. Annos Mundi. Annos Mundi for Latin in the year of the world. To the creation of the world. Abbreviated as AM or A.M. or the year of creation. Is a calendar era based on the biblical accounts of the creation of the world and subsequently history. Two such calendar eras have seen notable use historically. Okay, so Annos Dominos means the creation of the world, which is 3761. 3761. The calendar epoch corresponding to the calculated date of the world's creation is equivalent to the sunset of the Julian proleptic calendar date 6 October 3761 BC. You hear that? 3761 BC. The new year begins at Rosh Hashanah and Tishrei Annos Mundi in 5784, meaning that 5,784 years since the creation of the world begins sunset on the 15th September 2023, according to the Gregorian year. You hear that? So let's do the mathematics on that. Calendar mathematics of the 6,000 years prophecy fulfilled. We didn't see this date for a while now, so we all should pretty much understand it. And the Hebrew creation story, according to the Hebrew calendar, which we just seen on the calendar, that in the year 1 BC, under Gregorian calendar, which we know is a lie, because the Gregorian calendar was not created by Pope till 1582 by Pope Gregory the 13th. Okay? Pope Gregory the 13th did not create the Gregorian calendar to 1582. At this time, the only calendar that was existing is the calendar of existence by Rome through Julius Caesar. Okay? But we know that on that same example, we've seen that there was indeed, and in fact, a Berber year of 950 AD. Annios Dominios, in the year of our Lord. They said that the year 2024 was equivalent to the year 5784 AD. Once again, the present year 2024 is equivalent to the year 5784 Annos Dominios. So if you add 2024, which is the Gregorian year, to the year 3761, which is the Gregorian year, the year will be 5780. Pardon itself. If you add the Gregorian year, 2024, to the Hebrew year, 3761 AD, will come up to the Hebrew calendar 5784, which would be what we call the completion of 6,000 years, which in the Berber year is actually 2974, which we refer to that calendar today, because we know in 950 it was your creation story, and the year 2974 was the end of your creation story, which is equivalent in the Gregorian calendar 2024. I don't know how simpler to make that mathematical equation. Okay? So with that, let's go to the actual MS roll of 1066 and getting the explanation based upon those who have it in their possession. And those who have it in their possession is the University of Pennsylvania. The University of Pennsylvania. Okay? Let's pull them up. The University of Pennsylvania, commonly referred to as Penn or UPenn, is a private Ivy League research university in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, United States. It is one of the 9 colonial colleges and was chartered prior to the United States Declaration of Independence, when Benjamin Franklin, the university's founder and first president, advocated for an educational institution that trained leaders in academia, commerce, and public service. So University of Pennsylvania was founded by who? Benjamin Franklin. Okay, Benjamin Franklin. But the founding of it was rooted in Oxford and Cambridge. Okay, Oxford and Cambridge universities. Let's see. Right here. Campus. Much of Penn's current architecture was designed by the Philadelphia-based architecture firm Cope and Schwarzson, whose owners were Philadelphia-born and raised architects and professors at Penn, who also designed Princeton University and a large part of Washington University in St. Louis. They were known for having combined the Gothic architecture of the University of Oxford and the University of Cambridge with the local landscape to establish collegiate Gothic style. Okay? All right. Now that we got that out the way, let's go to the article. Now I'm going to play this YouTube. Everyone let me know that you can hear it. All right. And I'm going to stop it at certain points to just review the content of what's going on within this role or this scroll. All right. It's very important for you to pay attention. One second. Very important for you to pay attention to what's being said. Can everyone hear that? Okay, here we go, everyone. Welcome, everyone, to Coffee with a Codex. My name is Dot Porter. I am a curator in the KISS Center for Special Collections, Rare Books, and Manuscripts in the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. And every week, I pull I pull a book off of our shelves, and we spend about 30 minutes doing a little bit of a show and tell. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. This is MS Roll 1066. I have been told that that shelf mark is sort of a happy accident, but it's a lovely accident because indeed William the Conqueror himself shows up in this roll. We don't really get to pull this out very much because it's 37 feet long. So you heard him say that William the Conqueror is actually in this roll. Okay? William the Conqueror is actually in this roll. Before we play it, let me just show you the roll. Okay? So you have an idea of what it is that we're looking at. University of Penn's Library. So the content of what we're looking at in this MS roll, which is a genealogical chronicle from Adam and Eve to Edward IV. Edward IV was in conflict with Henry VI, who were both of the Plantagenet cadet branches of the Yorks and the Lancaster branch, which was started by Edward I, the parts of John Gaunt. the son of Edward the First. So according to this particular scroll or roll, all the children that descended down from Adam and Eve all the way up that came from Adam and Eve all the way up to Edward the Fourth are listed on this scroll. Now, all the people listed on the scroll are not God's children. All right. It's very important that you understand that. They are not God's children because all the stories that were existing simultaneously were recorded just because of ceremonial or what we call um what's called ceremonial community purposes. Okay, it's very important for you to understand that. All right. So as we see here, the rows are broken into what they call membranes stitched together. All right. The particular scroll is 36 feet long. Okay. So it's stitched together in membranes by what we call pages. All right. So the first one is of the page is called the biblical history and classical mythology. So when you're dealing with the biblical history and classical mythology, you have to go back into those 6,000 years when God created Adam and Eve. Okay. We already qualified that because at the time of Adam and Eve being created, which is the year of creation, the Berbers are already on the planet, or the Anglo-Saxon Berbers are already on the planet. Okay, we must understand that because the equivalent year to that year, and which they say Adam and Eve was created, which is the Hebrew calendar, the Berber year is 950. So if the Earth, if everything is being created, how are the Berbers existing? How the Berbers are existing? And 1911 said they had a government functioning as was an uncoded law. Membrane two. This goes into the Trojan Wars to Brutus Greenshell. We know the Trojan Wars are associated with Brutus of Troy. Okay? Very important for you to understand what it is that I'm giving you. We go to membrane three, we go to Lil Tucilius. We go to membrane four, you go to Kinmarcius, to Argelon, North, which is what we call North mythology. Okay? Membrane 5 going to Hilly and Julius Caesar to Carausius. If I'm pronouncing wrong, please forgive me. Okay? All this are associated with King Arthur was talking about the matters of Rome, the matters of France, and the matters of Britain. Okay? It's very, very important for you to comprehend that. So I'm going to be using two maps, well, one map simultaneously, which is the bigger map. Matter of fact, yeah, I'm only going to use those two maps because I pretty much showed you what's actually on the scroll. Okay, so please pay very close attention to the video because what they don't talk about in the actual video are very important to us as Anglo-Saxon Berbers because I have taught on this information and the information within the video they are leaving out. And these are supposed to be scholars in Penn University, but the very information that's pertinent to the actual people that they're talking about is not being spoken of. Okay? So when they speak, I'm going to stop and I'm going to compile on what it is that they failed to mention. And I'm going to even show you on the screen, qualified, that all these people listed in the scroll were melanated. Okay? Agreeable or disagreeable, they were melanated. We were all fighting amongst ourselves as a result of the birthright, which is apparently was inherited in the Plantagenet kings, okay, which was cut off by way of John Gaunt uh, uh, descendants, okay? And this is how Henry VII took over the estate because Henry VI and Henry VI and Edward the Fourth, yeah, Edward the Fourth was fighting over the estate. This brought on what we call the War of the Roses, which led to the 100-Year War. Okay, so I'm gonna let the Europeans at the in their so-called scholarly work go through their presentation or introduction, and then I'll stop and break down what they left out. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. Let me. Oh, I didn't finish the list. So it's the north. We have the biblical history, which covers the 6,000 years, which we're in the end of that year, covering Adam and Eve all the way up to Edward uh, uh, predecessors, which were us in this day and time, because Edward the Fourth is dead and gone. Okay, but somehow his genealogy was kept alive by the Third Temple English Church of England. So chapter 6 deals with Electus and Constantius. Membrane 7 deals with Vortigern to the early English Heptarchy. This goes into what we call the 7 petty kingdoms. All right. Once again, the 7 petty kingdoms to 9. The early history of the Heptarchy to Alfred the Great. So from the start of the Heptarchy to Alfred the Great. That means that when the 7 petty kingdoms became one kingdom. Then you go to Membrane 10, dealing with Edward the Elder. Membrane 11, dealing with Edmund I, the father of King Edward the Peaceful, to William the Conqueror, to William II, to Edward II, to Edward III, and to Edward IV. Okay? So it's very important for you to pay close attention to what's about to go down. Start it over.
Welcome everyone to Coffee with a Codex. My name is Dot Porter. I am a curator in the Duplex Center for Special Collections, Rare Books, and Manuscripts in the University of Pennsylvania Libraries.
So she's a map maker.
And every week, I pull one of a book. I pull a book off of our shelves, and we spend about 30 minutes doing a little bit of a show and tell. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. This is MS Roll 1066. I have been told that shelf mark is sort of a happy accident, but it's a lovely accident because indeed William the Conqueror himself shows up in this roll. We don't really get to pull this out very much because it's 37 feet long. And that's pretty long, and so it's hard to show it. Yeah, I think Chris, who is manning the camera, is going to show you. We have 4 tables out. So this is only 24 feet. So at some point, we are actually going to pause, and we're going to roll out the rest of the roll. So that should be exciting. People don't really get to see this very often, and I wanted to make sure that I could give this to you. So let's start with the roll. So what is the roll? Let me get my notes. Here we go. So can you can you tip it so, because it's not, there we go. Thank you. Okay, there we go. That's a little better. So MS Roll 1066 is a chronicle, a genealogical chronicle that was made to prove to everybody that Edward IV was the rightful king of England. It was made, I believe, in 1461 or around 1461 during the Wars of the Roses. So, little historical context. In England, you had the Lancastrians and the Yorkists, and they were both sort of jonesing for the throne. And one of the things that they did was put together these chronicles as a sort of, blanking on the word, the evidence. evidence is not the word I was looking for, but evidence works as proof that Edward IV, who was the Yorkist one to go on the throne, was actually the right king, which has always amused me a little bit because the Yorkists and the Lancastrians descended from the same king, and I can't remember which king it was, but he was in the mid 14th century. So maybe 100 years or so before this roll was made. So in fact, thinking of
if we know that Edward IV and Henry VI were descendants of John Gaunt, and John Gaunt was the son of Edward I. Edward I. Okay. We know Edward I was the father of Edward II. Edward II was the father of Edward III. Edward III was the father of John Gaunt. And that's where you got the other descendants, all right, which were broken up into what we call the Cadet branch and the Lancaster branch, were all fighting amongst themselves, but yet, in fact, that they were descendants of Adam and Eve, which we know based upon the calendar, Adam and Eve at the time of creation are existing at the same time that King Edward the Peaceful, which at that time was the emperor of Albion, okay, which was the land of giants. How I know it? I'm going to prove it to you. All right, let's continue.
That way, both of the ones who could be king essentially had the same genealogy. If you're thinking in sort of a scientific way, right? Clearly, you go 100 years and then they have the same great great grandfather, and then you go back all the way to Adam and Eve, which is where we are here, and I promise I will get here. But it wasn't kind of like that, I don't think. It was the putting it down kind of made it so. So it wasn't a scientific argument so much as a different kind, maybe an aesthetic argument. I'm not exactly sure. But now we have the roll. And so we can see all of the people and all of the sources that sort of went into this argument. And as we go, you will be constantly reminded that this is a genealogy. So you're tracing family lines. And a roll is a really great format for this because it doesn't stop. So you can have lines going and going and going and going into each other and then coming out again. And it's pretty interesting. So we start at the top. We start with the first membrane. You can see here that there's sort of a piece that's been sewn to the top to kind of help keep it on a roll when we get to that point. We have a little introduction. And then we have Adam and Eve. So we start with the Bible. We start with the very beginning of humanity going through. And we're sort of go quickly. We've got Noah.
Okay, let's deal with that. You have the Bible, according to the characters that are mentioned in the Bible, and its genealogical evidence pertaining to what they call a scroll. All right, which we know preceded the King James Bible, or preceded any Bible that was there prior to King James. Okay, and this is an ancient scroll that lived in the time of a king, not some abstract book written about somebody who did a thesis or had a theory on the events that was taking place when they were not actually there. This king was there, and he included all the narratives of all the stories that were told as a result of their influence and impact on the Anglo-Saxon Berbers, which we know was occurred as a result of the conversion of the Anglo-Saxon Berbers into Christianity. Okay, in 597 by Pope Gregory the First. Okay.
Here we have up here a map of the world, which is sort of interesting, what we call a T map, because you've got Asia, Africa, and Europe, so it's a little turned around from how we normally think about it. And then we go on down, And I have the computer here, so if you have questions as we go, please put them in the chat and I will keep my eyes out. So we have all of this biblical history, and the notes that I have say that the sources, although that this is biblical history, it's not quoting the Bible.
Did y'all hear that? She said, even though this is biblical history, it is not quoting the Bible. It is actually pulled from other sources, from other people who have talked about it, who have did the research. Okay? We must understand sources. All right?
Pulling the sources from other people who talk about biblical history. So it's a history kind of thing. So the introduction is from Roger of Wendover, Matthew of Paris. And then down here, something that's kind of interesting, our roll is from a small family of rolls. I think there are 4 other rolls or maybe 3 other rolls that are from the same family. But there are other genealogical rolls that were made for Edward IV that did the same thing but called from different sources. Is that right, Amy? Amy is here in the room with me.
Hello.
So
the families, that description of families is based on the introduction, like what text is used to introduce the text. And so there are 4 rolls that start with the same Latin phrase.
Right.
Okay, and I just want to make a clerical error. It's actually Henry VI and Edward IV that are at war through the time what we call the War of the Roses. All right, I wanted to make that correction.
But then the rolls themselves are the same after that, or
I think the only way to really know that would be to transcribe them all completely.
Okay.
And ours is transcribed, but we were not able to compare it to any others that were fully transcribed.
Yes, ours is transcribed. Actually, that reminds me, I forgot to put in the links. So let me put in the links really quickly for you all, because the first link, which is to the record in Franklin, there is, as Amy mentioned, there is, if you go into the record and click on transcription, it will take you to an online project where we have transcribed the whole manuscript and annotated it.
I can say that we know that one of the other rolls in the family, which is in a library in England, lines up with the text of this roll in the middle. And the reason that we know that is that that roll breaks off in the middle, and they give the little bit of text that's at the end, so I didn't kip it and explicit, and so we were able to find that bit of text in ours, so we know that that one matches quite closely.
That particular script is called court hand or Angelian hand.
This, of course, it's already 8 minutes in.
I'll show you in a few.
We get to the next membrane, where we're going from the Trojan War. So we're through the Bible all the way out. Trojan War to Brutus.
I'm sorry.
Look up Brutus.
Okay, so they're on the second scroll, and the second scroll goes into the history of Brutus Greenshell and the Trojan Wars. Okay, Brutus Greenshell and the Trojan Wars. All this goes back to the stories told by Godfrey of Monmouth. Okay, all right, and these go to history of Brutus Greenshell, and Brutus Greenshell descended from Brutus of Troy. Okay, once again, Brutus Greenshell descended down from Brutus of Troy, and Brutus of Troy sailed to Albion. Okay, Brutus of Troy sailed to Albion. This is very important that we comprehend this. So let's see. Let's see. We're going to come back to the video though. Brutus of Troy. Brutus, also called Brute of Troy, is a mythical British king. He is described as a legendary descendant of the Trojans heroes Aeneas, known in medieval British legend as the eponymous founder and the first king of Britain. This legend first appears in the Historia Britannicum, an anonymous 9th century historical compilation to which commentary was added by Ninidius, but is best known for the account given by the 12th century chronicler Godfrey of Monmouth in his Historica Regum Britannica. Okay? Very, very important to understand that. So Brutus of Troy is known as a legendary king of Britain, going back from the beginning of the Trojan Wars. Okay? It's very important for you to understand that. Now let's look at the issue in regards to the conflict that originated with Brutus of Troy. Look at his descendants. Okay? Longinus. Longinus was a legendary king of the Britons. All right? Britons, as recounted by the 12th century chronicler Godfrey of Monmouth in his Historia Regum Britannica. Now, Godfrey of Monmouth, he was Welsh, from Wales. All right? And that territory belonged to Wales or Welsh. We know that the flag of the Welsh is the red dragon, in contrast to the white dragon, which corresponds to the Anglo-Saxons, okay? Which were those who were ascended before the kings of England, which was called Gewiss. Gewiss was a government that existed, which was practiced by those who lived on the land, called folkland, going back to what we call the Wessex culture, which goes back to the Bronze Age. We know the Bronze Age preceded the Iron Age, from which the Celtic Britons came into existence from 800 BC. Okay, so pay very close attention to what it is that I'm saying. Longinus was a legendary king of the Britons, as recounted by the 12th century chronicler Godfrey of Monmouth in his Historia Regum Britannica, and he came to power at 1125 BC. Look at the face on Longinus. Melanated. All right? Melanated. Let's look at another son of Brutus from Troy. Camber. King Camber. Camber was the legendary first king of Cambria, according to Godfrey of Monmouth, in his first part of his influential 12th century pseudo-history, Historia Regum Britannica, according to Godfrey. Cambria, the classical name for Wales, was named for him. Okay? Everybody see that. But it's pseudo. We know pseudo means false. All right? And the other son, Albenacus. Albenacus. Albenacus, according to Godfrey of Monmouth, was the founding king of Albania or Albany. Okay? He is in fact Godfrey's eponym for Scotland. His territory was the north of the Humber estuary. This myth was taken up by Giraldus Cambrinus. So all these individuals are associated with Brutus of Troy. And we can see, based upon the depiction of these characters or entities, they are clearly melanated. Okay? They are clearly melanated. Okay? So now, as a result of that, let's go to Brutus Greenshell. Because we know Brutus Greenshell was a descendant of Brutus of Troy, which was mentioned in the MS scroll of 1066. Bear with me. Okay. Roger Greenshell, Welch, was a legendary king of the Britons, not Britain, not Albany, but of Britons, as accounted by Godfrey of Monmouth. He was the son of King Abracus and came to power in 100 BC. Here go a picture of Abracus, was the legendary king of the Britons, as recounted by Godfrey of Monmouth, and he came to power in 1040 BC. He was the son of King Mempricius and father of Brutus of Greenshell. So you can go all down the line and see clearly that these Britons are melanated entities. Okay? Very, very, very important for you to understand that. Also, we can look up the what we call it, where I wanted to go. Histories of the Kings of Britain. Okay? Histories of the Kings of Britain. All right, Penarius 23C. All right, very important. Okay, history of the Kings. Penarth 23C. The history of the Kings of Brute E. Brenhenhead is a Welsh translation of the Godfrey of Monmouth's Historia Regum Britannia, History of the Kings of Britain. All right. The manuscript, which was copied in the late 15th century, is probably the only illustrated Welsh language medieval narrative. It is part of the Penera manuscript collection at the National Library of Wales. Okay. Now look at the characters here. Okay. Look at these images, and these going into the history of the Britons. All right, going back to Brutus of Troy, the Trojan Wars. All right. The image is out, y'all. Jesus Christ, Christ being. make sure I went through all of them. All right. These are all our descendants, melanated. Okay, so this goes to the history before the kings of England. This goes to history before the seven petty kingdoms. This goes back to history of what we call the Britons, and the Britons goes back to 800 BC. All right, the Iron Age. We know that the Western culture goes back to the Bronze Age. So the descendants of King Alfred the Great, which was consolidated from seven kingdoms to one, all the successors of those Wessex culture that existed before you even get to Britain, the Celtics, or the French, or the Romans, because we know Romans were the successor of them all. Okay, let's prove it. I'm going to prove it based upon the facts that I present to you as my people. Okay, let's go back once again to the video. All right, once again, let's go back to the video.
I hadn't heard of him. He was mentioned by Geoffrey of Monmouth, who wrote History of the Kings of Britain. So Brutus Greenshield is one of the kings of Britain mentioned in there. So we're already away from Europe. We are now in the Isles, right, in the English Isles. And so we come down here. And as Chris is sort of going through this, you're going to see different sections. So you're going to see some kings. These are all kings, or others, mostly kings, other important people. Some of them get faces and little crowns. Some of them just get crowns with different sort of watercolor backgrounds, which is sort of nice. And then we have names in circles. These are sort of less important. People sort of kind of passing over them. Okay,
well, there are many children of that king.
Yes, these are all his children,
sons and daughters.
Yes, and the ones in red are the daughters. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So when you see names in the circles that are in red, those are women. We figured this out. All right. So now we're down to Brutus Greenshield there. And then we're going to stay in Britain. Britain being sort of pre-Roman, so-called Anglo-Saxon England. So we start with Lyle or Leal, who was one of Brutus Greenshield's sons.
Okay, and then let's stop there. Lyle, one of Brutus Greenshield's son. Okay, let's take a look at Lyle. Lyle was a legendary king of the Britons. As accounted by Godfrey of Monmouth, he was the son of King Brutus Greenshield and came to power at 987 BC. Okay, as you can see, the color marks show that these people are clearly melanated. If they were not melanated, they would not have the color marks in there, and they would have just left it white. Okay, we must understand the revelation that you are receiving today. Okay? And it says here, Lil, this is Godfrey asserts that Lil reigned at the time when Solomon built the temple in Jerusalem. And Soviet estimates was king of Alba, Lanja. You hear that? according to Godfrey Amambas. All right? It's very important that all these stories were told by Godfrey Amambas, okay? Concerning all the kings of Britain, starting from Brutus of Troy, okay? Starting from Brutus of Troy. We must understand that because that takes us to what we call Albion. In 930, the English king Atherton used the title Rex et Permissivius Totius Albanius Regne, king in chief of the whole realm of Albion. His nephew Ager the Peaceful, look at the picture, there's no color, not like that within that scroll. Look at the face. All right. Styled himself in 970 as Totius Albanius Imperator Augustus, means August, Emperor of all Albion. Now, this is very important because we understand that there's a pseudo story told by the Celtic Britons, from which Brutus of Troy descended down from, all right, which are Welsh descendants, all right, because Celtic Britons were Welsh. You know what I'm saying? We have to understand that he who writes your books sets your timeline. Time never was when we were not. The lifetime began, the time will come where will be no more. So we see that Ashurton, King Edgar the Peaceful, were kings of Wessex. Okay, they didn't come into till the time of Alfred the Great, which was not even mentioned yet in the scroll that we're talking about. They were talking about pre-Wessex, but we know that the Wessex culture go back to what we call the Bronze Age. Okay, so that means that the descendants of the kings of Wessex were here before the Celtic Britons. What is the Wessex culture? Let's just see. The Wessex culture. The Wessex culture is the predominant prehistoric culture of Central and Southern Britain during the early Bronze Age. You hear that? The early Bronze Age. We must understand that the Wessex culture goes back to the early Bronze Age. Okay? And we know that the Wessex culture, if it goes back to the Bronze Age, it encompasses the seven kingdoms. Okay? Called the Heptarchy. Let's look at that real quick before we go back to the video. Because she's going to talk about that. The Heptarchy were the seven petty kingdoms of the Anglo-Saxon England that flourished from the Anglo-Saxon settlement of Britain in the 5th century until they were consolidated in the 8th century into the four kingdoms of East Anglia, Mercia, Northumbria, and Wessex. The term Heptarchy from hepta means seven. Arch means reign or rule, and the suffix "ia". It is used because of the traditional belief that there had been seven Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, usually described as East Anglia, Essex, Kent, Mercia, Northumbria, Sussex, and Wessex. Did you hear that? All right. So there were petty kingdoms known as East Anglia, Essex, Kent, Mercia, Northumbria, Sussex, and Wessex, all ruled by melanated beings. Okay? If you're going to take these kings and go all the way back to Adam and Eve, because the scroll clearly shows that they were, in fact and indeed, melanated entities. We understand that the Heptarchy, as it states, alongside the seven kingdoms, a number of other political divisions also existed, such as the kingdoms of Bernicia and Daria within Northumbria. Lindsay in the present-day Lincolnshire, and Harwich in the southwest Midlands. The Magnaset or the Magnaset of sub-kingdoms of Mercia and what is now called Herefordshire. The Withwar, a Justin kingdom of the Isles of Wight, originally as important as the Cantawara of Kent. The Middle Ages, a group of tribes based around modern Lincolnshire, later conquered by the Mercians, the Hastings around the town of Hastings in Sussex, and the Gawees. Okay? And the Gawees. We must understand that the decline of the Heptarchy and the eventual emergence of the Kingdom of England was a drawn-out process taking place over the course of the 9th and 10th century. In the 9th century, the Danish enclave at York expanded into the Danelaw, with about half of England under Danish rule, i.e. Viking rule. English unification under Alfred the Great was a reaction to the threat from this common enemy. In 886, Alfred retook London, and the Anglo-Saxon chronicles state that all of the English people, all Anglican, not subject to the Danes, submitted themselves to King Alfred. We must comprehend that. Unification of the Kingdom of England was complete only in the 10th century following the expulsion of Eric Bloodaxe as King of Northumbria. Atherton is credited as the first to be the king of all of England, called the Kingdom of England. But the Kingdom of England was preceded by Gawees, all right? And Gawees was practiced by what we call folkland. Let's see. The Gawees were a tribe or ruling clans of the Anglo-Saxons. Their first location mentioned in early medieval sources was the Upper Thames region around Dorchester or Thames. However, some scholars suggest that the Gawees had origins among the ancient Britons in Wiltshire. According to Saxon folklore, the Gawees were the founders of the kingdoms of Wessex. So that means that if the Gawees were the founders of the kingdom of Wessex and they were folkland, then that must mean they must go back to what we call the Wessex culture, which originated in what we call the Bronze Age. So if that's the case, we know that the Celtic Britons originated in the Iron Age, and that goes to what we call Brutus of Troy. Okay, so let's go to Albion. Once again, we see here, according to the Berber calendar, because no English breeding out year doesn't come into effect till William the Conqueror in 1066. So we know that the Anglo-Saxon Berber Asherton, we know Berber means dark or burnt face, which we know that these are melanated entities. English King Anton used the title Rex as the chief of the whole realm of Albion, and his nephew King Edgar used the term Imperator Augustus as the emperor at Albion. And at this time, there were giants on the planet, okay? As told by Godfrey of Monmouth. It's very important. The legends existed in various forms that giants were either the original habits or the founders of the land named Albion. John Milton told the story in his History of Britain in 1670. And the book he recounts that the land was subdued by Albion, a giant, son of Neptune, who called the land after his own name and ruled in 44 years. Now, it's very important that we understand, as I always say, who writes your books set your timeline, because we know that the Celtic Britons were which Brutus of Troy and Brutus Greenshell, as well as their descendants, were those who migrated or immigrated to the island called Albion. How we know it, we have this picture right here of Albania and other daughters of Dionysius in the front, right here. All right. Then it says, two giants of Albion are in the background encountering by a ship carrying Brutus and his men. That's according to what we call the Brute Chronicles. Okay? Let's look at the photo. As you can see, the face on the left is clearly melanated. The face on the right of the giant looks Nordish type, okay? Which they clear the trees here on your left. As you can see here, Buddhist of Troy, right here. And this is Adina and her maidens with her, okay? So it's very important to look at the image as well and clearly see that there's already melanated entities in Albion, which clearly said it was the land of the giants. And it said that Brutus of Troy and his men came to Albion. Okay? Very important. So if they came to Albion, the next question is when did they come to Albion? It says, after many adventures, Brutus and his fellow Trojans, all right, escaped from Gaul and set sail with a fair wind toward the promised land. So Brutus of Troy was sailing to the promised land, and we see that the promised land was called Albion. Okay? This island was then called Albion and inhabited by none but a few giants. Notwithstanding this, the pleasant situation of the places, the plenty of rivers abounding with fish, and the engaging prospect of its woods made Brutus and his company very desirous to fix their habitation in it. After dividing up the island between themselves, at last Brutus called the island after his own name, Britain, and his companions Britons, for by these means he desired to perpetuate the memory of his name. Godfrey goes on to recount how the last of the giants are defeated. Okay? It's very important you understand that. Anglo-Norman Albania story. Now, this is strange. The picture you see here is recorded in the Brute Chronicles, as he said right here, which we'll talk about in a second. This is Anglo and Norman. Later in the 14th century, now we're talking about Albion now. We went from Albion, where giants, all the way up to the 14th century, concerning Albania, who, as well as Brutus of Troy and his companions, all right, going or taking a ship to what we call the island of Albion. Okay? This is later in the 14th century, a more elaborate tale was developed, claiming that Albania and her sisters found Albion and procreated there a race of giants. The Albania story survives in several forms, including the Autosyllabic Anglo-Norman poem, Des Grands Genèse, dating to 1300 and 1344. According to the poem, in 3970, the year of creation of the world, a king of Greeks married his 30 daughters into royalty, but the haughty brides colluded to eliminate their husbands so they would be subservient to no one. This is 3970 in the year of creation of the world. We already know that at the time of 3970, at the year of the creation of the world, and the Berber year is 950, and in 950 is King Edgar the Peaceful. And at that time in Albion, he stated that he was the emperor of Albion. Okay? He was the emperor of Albion because it shows you right here in the picture that Brutus and Troy and Albania is emigrating or migrated to Albion, where there's giants there. And they are those living in what they call the promised land. All right. According to the Brute Chronicle. All right. According to the Brute Chronicle. And they're living at the year of creation. Let's go back to 1 BC. Hell, BC might stand for before creation. One BC. 1 BC. which was the year of the birth of Jesus. All right. Dated system in 1 BC, modern scholarship, however, regards the birth of Christ to have taken place between 6 and 4 BC. Whichever year you choose, it still fits in the timeline of King Edgar the Peaceful, because there is no English week now yet, but yet there's a Berbic calendar existing. But at that time, the equivalent story of the Bible is that of the Hebrews, which is the time of creation. But there is no calendar for Britain or for Brutus of Troy. I don't see a calendar here. Okay? There is no calendar here to qualify that Brutus of Troy's descendants, who called themselves Britons, who originated in the Iron Age, 800 BC, actually existed. But yet, or nonetheless, the story was preserved as a result of Alfred the Great's Doom's book. Once again, Alfred the Great's Doom book. So if Albion was ruled by King Edgar the Peaceful, which we see here, and Ashton, which is the 10th century, then the story told by Godfrey of Monmouth could not have existed, because somebody's already on the island when Brutus and Albania gets there. Okay? It's very important. And that is at the time of creation, 3970. Okay? And creation started in 3761. Okay? 3761. So we must be able to see the forest from the trees. Why is this important, brothers and sisters? Why is this important? Let's see. The kings of Britain. The title Kings of Britain was used often retrospectively to refer to a ruler, especially one who might be regarded as the most powerful among the Celtic Britons, both before and after. The period of Roman Britain up until the Norman invasion of Wales and the Norman conquest of England, Britons were the Britannic-speaking ancestral language of Welsh people of what is now Wales, England, and southern Scotland. The British contributed as ethnic ancestors of the native British population, including the Welsh, Cornish, English, and Scottish people, were also a Briton. During the Norman and Plantagenet period, only Wales remained under Britannic rule in Britain, and the term Briton. It was used in Britain to mean Welsh people. This and the diminishing power of the Welsh rulers relative to the kings of England. It reflected in the gradual evolution of the titles by which these rulers were known, from kings of Britain in the 11th century to princes of Wales in the 13th century. Why is this very important? Because you have to go into what we call the Celtic Britons. Who are the Celtic Britons? The Britons, Celtic Britons, or the ancient Britons, were the indigenous Celtic people who inhabited Great Britain from at least the British Iron Age until the High Middle Ages, at which point they diverged into the Welsh, Cornish, Bretons, among others, and they spoke Common Britannic, the ancestors of the modern Britannic languages. So they originated from the Iron Age, or the British Iron Age. Let's take a look at that. What's the British Iron Age? The British Iron Age is a conventional name used in archaeology of Great Britain, referring to prehistoric, protohistoric phases of the Iron Age, or the Iron Culture, of the main island and the smaller islands, typically excluding prehistoric island, which has an independent Iron Age culture of its own. The Iron Age is not an archaeological horizon of common artifact, but it's rather a local, diverse cultural phase. It is started from 800 BC to 400 AD. That means from the time of the Celtic Britons to the time of the invasion of Rome. Okay? It was preceded by what? The Bronze Age of Britain. Okay? So look at the Bronze Age of Britain, which did not begin in 800 BC, but ended in 800 BC as a result of the Iron Age, which goes back to the Celtic Britain and the stories told by Godfrey of Monmouth, including the stories of King Arthur, whose bones were found by who? Henry II, the son of Godfrey, the fifth Count of Anjou, son of Fulk, ruler of Jerusalem. The Bronze Age is an era of British history that spanned from 2000, 2500 to 2000 BC until 800 BC when the Celtic Britons come on the scene. Bronze Age Britain is an era of British history that spanned from 2500 to 2000 BC until 800 BC, lasts for approximately 1,700 years. It was preceded by the era of the Neolithic Britain and was in turn followed by the period of the Iron Age of Britain. Being categorized as the Bronze Age, it was marked by the use of copper and then bronze by the prehistorics, Britons who used such metals to fashion tools. Great Britain in the Bronze Age also saw the widespread adoption of agriculture. This is what we call the Wessex culture. Okay? The Wessex culture is the predominant prehistoric culture of Central and Southern Britain during the early Bronze Age, originally defined by the British archaeological Stuart Piggott. All right, so we see that the Bronze Age existed around that time, that existed prior to the Iron Age. Okay, we must understand that to find your place in history. Okay, to find your place in history. All right, so now let's go back to the actual video.
Then we remain in Britain and we go down, down and down. And there is something, so we've got the main line. So these are the British kings. But then there's something happening here in yellow. And I wanted to, can we go back up here for a second?
That's Rome.
So they want to look at this. So this line, this is again, one of the great things about our roll is you can see that this line goes out and then comes down. And I'm actually going to look at Amy because I'm not entirely sure what is happening here. If it's a parallel.
I didn't call you. No.
These are the Roman emperors.
Yeah, Roman emperors, that's right. Okay. So we've got Rome alongside Britain. So this is sort of an interesting way that they're sort of conceptualizing this. You know, they acknowledging this other important ones. And then the text that's along here, I think is just sort of descriptive. Is it always associated with the, I'm asking, is it always associated?
Usually each A is for the word anno, and it's talking about a particular event that happened, and it is usually connected with one of the kings. And often it's like, this is how this person died, or this is this person was in a shipwreck, like the sort of the most dramatic highlights.
Right. Okay. All right. And then we get to another king. We have King Marcus, who is another British king. And then we go through these lines. And then when we get to the bottom, the last king on the page is Argolan, who is Norse. So if you're, familiar with your sort of English history, you know that there was a very strong and long-standing, I call it relationship, but between the Norse and English. from
Okay.
pretty early on.
Let's stop there and just visit that real quick. Remember, it's the Celts telling the story by way of Godfrey of Monmouth. Okay? Godfrey of Monmouth. Latin, Galfridius Monmouthus or Galfridius Arturus. All right? Born in 1095 to 1155, was a Catholic cleric from Monmouth, Wales, and one of the major figures of the development of the British historiography and the popularity of the tales of King Arthur. Okay? He's best known for his chronicles of the history of the kings of Britain. All right? As we can see. Thank you. King Arthur. We must understand that. Godfrey of Monmouth is responsible for the stories of King Arthur, and King Arthur is responsible for the stories of what we call the matters of Britain, the matters of France, and the matters of Rome. Okay? The matters of Britain, the matters of France, and the matters of Rome. We talked about the matters of Britain concerning those who immigrated to Albion before it became known as Britain, because we know that Albion was there before the Britons got there. Okay? We know that when the Britons got there, then the Romans came invaded after that. All right? We must understand that. So we know that the matter of Britain and the matter of Rome involves Celtic Britain as well as Romans who descended from or one of the rulers were Julius Caesar, okay? As well as the matter of France, which goes into the kings of France, which Clovis I was the founder of that, all right, which we discussed in my prior lesson. So if you haven't reviewed that, please go back and watch that, all right? So we know that King Arthur, which is a story told by Godfrey of Monmouth, who was from Welsh or from Wales. And we know that when we understand the history of Wales, the flag of Wales is what they call a dragon. Okay? It is a red dragon contrast to a white dragon. So when we read the white dragon versus red dragon, let's read a little bit about that before I go on. The white dragon is a symbol associated in West mythology with the Anglo-Saxons. Everybody understand that? The earliest usage of the white dragon as a symbol of the Anglo-Saxon is found in Historia Brittonum. The relevant story takes place in Denius and Mirius when Vortigern tries to build a castle there. Every night, unseen forces demolish the castle wall and foundation. Vortigern consults his advisors, who tells him to find a boy with no natural father and to sacrifice him. Vortigern finds such a boy, but on hearing that he is to be put to death to solve the demolishing of the walls, the boy dismisses the knowledge of the advisor. The boy tells the kings of the two dragons. Vortigern excavates the hill, freeing the dragons. They continue their fight, and the red dragon finally defeats the white dragon. The boy tells Vortigern that the white dragon symbolized the Saxons and the red dragon symbolized the people of Vortigern. Okay? The people of Vortigern. And they go into what we call the Celtic Britons. So the Celtic Britons took over the history concerning the Saxons, which concerns the white dragons, which was the Anglo-Saxons, which came to be called the kings of England. We know they descended from 7 petty kingdoms, which descended down from those which were associated with Adam and Eve. Okay, we must understand that because we know that according to history dealing with France, they never claimed to be descendants of Adam and Eve. We know descendants of the Celtic Britons, they never claimed to be descendants of Adam and Eve, as well as that of Rome, because they were converted from the original story of Adam and Eve. Because we know that the original story of Adam and Eve is based upon genealogy. Okay? Genealogy. So let's get on with this lesson. As well as the writings that we're looking at is called Court Hand or Eleganda Curse of Antiqua or Charter Hand. which was a style of handwriting used in medieval English law courts, the later by professionals such as lawyers and clerks. It is noticeably upright and packed together with exaggeratedly long ascenders and descenders, the latter often in the former occasionally brought round in sweeping crescent shapes and curves. And we can see that narrative in the MS roll 1066. Let's just read it for ourselves before I go back to the video. Where is that? Where is it at? I'm just going to keep going. All right, let's see. Where are we at? All right. So we go back to Albion, right? We go back to Albion. This is the first time Bruce of Troy encountered Albion along with his companions, his wife, or his descendants, was recorded in what they call the Brute Chronicles. So what is the Brute Chronicles? The Brute Chronicles, also known as the Prose Brute, is a collective name of a number of medieval chronicles of the history of England. The original Prose Brute was written in Anglo-Norman and was subsequently translated in Latin English. The first Anglo-Norman version ends with the death of King Henry III. Once again, King Henry III of the Plantagenet dynasty. All right. So we know that King Henry III recorded the Brute Chronicles, denoting to Brutus of Troy, as well as his descendants immigrated or migrated to what we call Albion. I mean, at that time, Albion was ruled by who? King Edgar the Peaceful. One second. Ruled by King Edgar the Peaceful. All right. So you got a time span of nine 943 nine what King Edgar became king in 959. Okay. So from 959 to 1272, Albion is being ruled by the kings of Plantagenet kings and the kings of Wessex. All right. While the story of Brutus of Troy, the story of the Carolingian dynasty, as well as the story of Rome, were all being fabricated. These stories are all false, but yet our ancestors still included them in the MS roll 1066. It's very important for you to understand that. Okay? All right? It's very important for you to understand that. Let's go back to the actual video. All right, let's continue.
So that's what we're doing. You can see we're already down to membrane 5. So membrane 5, we have Heli, who is the king here, And over here, that's Julius Caesar.
Julius Caesar.
So he's continuing the line of Roman emperors.
Okay.
But he's almost by himself. Like, he doesn't actually have any lines coming off of him. It's like,
and his fancy crown is probably sort of a nod to the Romanness and the idea of what later got referred to as the papal tiara. So that it's this funny sort of like mix of Rome with Catholicism, even though we're talking about Julius Caesar.
Right. Cool. Yeah.
Now, Julius Caesar invaded Britain in 54 BC. Okay. Then Rome, they were expelled, and they came back in 54 BC. I mean AD. All right. It's very important to understand because they involve the matters of Rome. All right. We're not even talking about the matters of France because they ain't even came up. All right, on the scroll. But Rome did come up, and then they mentioned Julius Caesar as well. And they also mentioned what? The matters of that which existed before came after Albion, which was the term of the word Britain, Britannia, Brittany, and Alba. All right, all these terms were names given to those who invaded England. All right, when the original name of it was called Albion, ruled by who? Our Jesus Christ. All right, and these definitely were the gods. All right, and they possibly could have been giants, as told. All right, so let's go back to the video and watch it.
So the person who made this, 1461. So this is, they would be coming at it with that sort of point of view. So Lynn has a question. I'm aware of Brutus, grandson of Aeneas, as founder of Britain, who's in Geoffrey of Monmouth, but not the Brutus you mentioned, unless I'm mishearing you. So all I can tell you, Brutus Greenshield, when I Googled that name, it took me to Wikipedia.
Geoffrey.
And said that he was mentioned in Geoffrey of Monmouth. But I will defer to you because I haven't read.
He's a descendant of the Brutus. Like, he's a great grandson or something.
Oh, great grandson of the earlier Brutus. Right.
Can we talk about the run?
I almost passed him over. Yes. There's Jesus. So Jesus is bored. Finally.
That's the BC AD line.
Yes, the BC or the
You heard that? It says the BC AD line. Hear that? The BC AD line. Let's go back to the BC or AD line. Okay? The BC AD line is right here. BC, then you move from BC to AD, and the birth year is 950 or 951. When, according to the calendar, according to the Hebrews, there is no story for creation yet. So that means that all these entities must have been gods. Okay? That's why the manuscript said that these deities refer to those going back to Adam and Eve. Do it make sense? Of course. All right, let's go back to the video.
BCEC, yes. Line is right here. And then I'm not actually sure who these people are because clearly they're not direct descendants of Jesus.
No, this is context.
Yes.
You hear that? Clearly they aren't descendants of Jesus. Why? Because they don't have that same complexion.
Roman emperor when the Romans came to Britain.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see he also has sort of a fancy tiara that looks different from the English king's crown.
He has a fancy tiara. He also has an interesting looking sword.
Yes.
It looks like a scimitar.
Also looks kind of more Eastern.
Yeah.
And then the next figure down is probably Lucius, king who was credited with inviting Christianity into England, and that is why he's holding a church, right? And then there are 3 bishops below him, which also makes the church connection.
Right. because it would have been also in Edward's interest to sort of show the close relationship between his line and the church going far back, I assume.
Probably. I mean, we haven't gotten up to the time of the split yet, so they're
Oh, right. Yeah.
But you know, they did believe in the divine right of kings, so the church is an important support for the monarchy.
Right. And so this is membrane 6, electus to Constantinus, which again I think are Roman emperors, but it's about to get wild, Fred.
All right. So we deal with the matters of Rome. They mentioned Julius Caesar, as well as the other emperors who invaded Britain, which came after the Celtic Britons invaded Albion, all right, which is Brutus of Troy, which was both mentioned in this particular scroll, which clearly were not like the Anglo-Saxons, all right, because they say in the Frankish history or Frankish matter, which was started by the Carolingian, which was started by the Burgundian, which was started by Clovis I, that they didn't descend from God like the Anglo-Saxons. So we know that the Anglo-Saxon is represented by the white dragon, and the Celtic Britons are represented by the red dragon. Okay? Very important. All right? So now we're going to see how the children of God, who were not the Celtic Britons, because they originated in the Iron Age of Britain, when not in the Bronze Age of Britain, which was the Wessex culture, which then gave birth to what we call the Wessex kings, or the kings of Wessex, which was started with Alfred the Great. But prior to that, there were 7 petty kingdoms that were made up of the 7 called the Heptarchy, which we'll talk about in a second. All right, let's hear it.
We have Vortigern, I'm not saying he's particularly wild, but as we go down, Vortigern, and then here, and then we have a few.
This guy's famous.
Who's that?
Arthur.
Oh, yes, okay.
King Arthur.
Over the important ones. There's King Arthur. See him. So King Arthur, and then we have. I promise it's about to get wild. We have English kings. Here we are. So here we have the early English Heptarchy. So this is the 7 sort of proto-kingdoms that, as we're at the end of our line, we're gonna pause and unroll the rest of the roll so you can see what happens with these 7 lines, because eventually they're going to go from 7 to 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then we have England. That's very exciting. Chris, will you hold?
Shh, I will hold the glide.
Hold that.
Yep.
And
So from 7 kingdoms to 1 kingdom, that goes into the Heptarchy that we talked about a little while ago. I'm sorry about that, y'all.
here, so as they're rolling, can you show this? Because one of the things that you missed is that there's actually writing on the back of the roll. So you can step back a little bit more to sort of show.
There you go. This is on the back is another genealogical work, but it's all the genealogy of Jesus, right? And it's a text that was used a lot in schools. And one thing that's cool is when we get to the BCE line, the birth of Jesus is actually in the same spot on the other side of the roll, which just seems too perfect.
Yeah, I think, and also, don't they also have Adam and Eve on the same side?
Yep.
So there is some thought that maybe it's not coincidence, that maybe it was planned. It was planned that way. So here we have, there's Jesus. And so when we get to, there he is. He's gonna go over.
And then here's the nativity scene on the other side.
That's a little bit, it's upside down, but that's okay.
It's just seasonal.
All right. Oh, sorry, I'm not sure where the sound is coming from.
No gloves, no nothing.
Genealogy is on the back. It's the genealogy of Christ, written by Peter Poitiers in 13th century. And on the other side of the Jesus symbol on the front is the nativity, that picture of the nativity. So, all right, so now we're going to Amy and Tessa, who is our friend from conservation, who has been very helpful in sort of helping us get this all figured out. Right here. Here we go, and then we'll unroll the rest of it, and then we'll have about 10 more minutes up through the rest of the roll. So I hope this part is interesting and not just boring. I know the first time I saw somebody work a roll like this, it kind of blew my mind because I've never seen it.
Okay. So before we play the video, remember we learned from the Bronze Age, which was the Wessex culture, which was from 2000 BC to 800 BC, which came with what we call the Iron Age of British, which was from 800 BC to 43 BC, which started with the time of Julius Caesar when he invaded Britain, okay, but lasted up to what we call the 6th century. And at that time, you get into what we call the 7 petty kingdoms, which is called the Heptarchy, okay? The 7 kingdoms, which all dumbed down and became one kingdom, which originated with Alfred the Great. Okay? So you must understand what it is that I'm saying to you that clearly they aren't mentioning in this particular breakdown. Okay? And you're not hearing these words or these terms. They leaving out certain kings which are paramount to us in regards to understanding the concept of that the anointing of Christ. All right? Because Clovis the First was not the anointed of Christ, which was associated with the matters of France, which were started by Clovis the First, the founder of a Viking dynasty, which never claimed to be the sins of God. So that means that he could have not be the anointed, nor was Rome, because Rome crucified our Savior. Okay? And we know that our Savior wasn't crucified on those crosses because he was brought to Glastonbury, okay, England. We know Glastonbury, England is where the story where the first church was created called the Wattle Church. We understand that King Edgar the Peaceful was buried in Glastonbury, okay? So we understand the connection that I'm making here, all right? Let's move on.
Oh. All right. What a plan. Wow. Okay. So here we go. So this is about where we left off. I think this is still membrane 8. So we have let me count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have 7 lines, and each kingdom has its own line of kings.
The family tree is sort of on fire at the moment.
The family tree is on
format can't handle.
That's right. So, and then we get here, and then all of a sudden we have 6, right? So this is the point where we start coming. So we come all the way down, and pretty quickly we go from 6 to 5 to 4 to 2, and then by the time we get to the bottom, that should be Alfred the Great. Alfred the Great, 10th century, I believe he was. First sort of acknowledges the first sort of king of a united England.
All right.
There we go.
Stop. So we see there were 7 petty kingdoms before they became one kingdom consolidated. All right. This was called the Heptarchy. Okay. The Heptarchy. The kingdoms of East Anglia, Essex, Kent, Mercia, Northumbria, Sussex, and Wessex. Okay. All these territories was predated by the stories in reference to the biblical characters that apparently were coded in law in Alfred's Dooms book. Okay? In Alfred's Dooms book. We must understand that. The Dooms book of Alfred the Great. The Dooms book, or the Code of Alfred, or the Law Code of Alfred the Great, was the code of law, Dooms being a law or judgment, compiled by Alfred the Great in 893 AD. Alfred codified 3 prior Saxon codes, that of Ethelbert of Kent, Enea of Wessex, and Ulfr of Mercia, to which he prefixed a modified version of the Ten Commandments of Moses and incorporated rules of the life from the Mosaic codes and the Christian codes of ethnics. Okay? We must understand that. It goes back to the Talmud, the Midrash, and what is the other one? The Zohar. Okay? You must comprehend. All that is really about astronomy. All right, just go back to the video.
So his son, I think Edward the Elder.
Edward the Elder, right there.
So these are our first kings of England. See all his children. He had some daughters, which is sort of nice to see. Amy, what were these?
Now we're worried about the kings of France.
Frankish kings, okay? Frankish kings, running parallel with the kings of Wessex.
See that in a minute. So we have them sort of hanging out over there. And we have the kings coming down here. By the time we get down here, we have Ethelred Unred, I think is here.
That's right, in the middle, the man with his 2 wives, or
two wives, or maybe his mother and his wife, I'm not sure. And then we have Edmund the First, and we have a few more. Take note of the.
Okay, so they don't even mention the sons of Edmund. They just mention Edmund the First. All right. Edmund the First had sons, from which one of those sons was our Jesus Christ. Okay? One of those sons was our Jesus Christ, but she don't mention that though. All right? Only thing she's concerned about, which was the story told by the conquerors, because she gonna love talking about William the Conqueror. Let's see.
Red line coming down the side, because here we go. I'm not going to forget him. Here we have William the Conqueror. We have that red line coming in, the Norman line of kings. Again here, Rollo, first Duke of Normandy. Thank you. That was Rollo. And note, you've got gold here. So finally, we have Norman kings with a little bit of gold. And now we are getting closer and closer. We're within,
So she said German kings. William Conqueror must have been a German.
Down to, we'll end with Edward II. And the lines, I don't know if the lines are getting complicated exactly, but we're seeing sort of more people, more children, more kings with faces as opposed to crowns. I think all of the kings after William the Conqueror have faces attached to them. Whether they actually look like that, probably not.
You hear that?
It's nice that they gave.
He said, whether they look like that, probably not. How you gonna say that? And it's right there on the manuscript. All right. So how are they supposed to look? Like you? Come on, man. We really got to be serious with this. All right. He's trying to discredit as a result of it not being whitewashed. But yet these stories are being told by us, but our brothers and sisters don't want to hear this story. All right. This is why they don't take us serious. All right.
So we have Edward II down here, and then Edward III.
And Emily Steiner, professor of English here at Penn would say that this is the problem moment as far as the Yorkists and the Lancastrians go, because there were too many children.
There were lots and lots of children.
Enough children to make sure that one was going to work, but then when too many of them survive, problems.
Then you have the problem, which was that then you had these two descending lines. Somebody shared a grandfather, and then it was all a big mess. And so you have a lot of lines coming out and then coming back in here, but finally get to the very end, and who does it end with? It ends with Edward IV, looking pretty young, and king-like. So this is proof that he is the rightful king of England. And actually his appearance, I think, helps us date, because it's not dated. Like there's nobody wrote a date on the scroll. But because he doesn't appear with his wife.
Right. That's where the 1461 comes from. It's because even a year later, I think his wife would have been included.
Right, because we have other roles that have his wife included in it. Is that right?
Probably. We do have other roles where things got added.
Yeah.
And roles that go further along the history of the monarchy. Not we at Penn, we the world.
Well, this is our only Edward IV role.
Yeah. So
Just this one.
This is one.
So there's a super fancy one at the Free Library.
There is a really nice one at the Free Library, yes. So this is MS Roll 1066, the entire genealogy of Edward IV. And we actually have a couple of minutes. So if there are questions and we can answer them, you can try.
We don't know. That's all right. You can answer our questions. All right. So it's very important to understand, based upon the video that we just viewed, that you must understand the genealogy of the kings of Plantagenet, okay? And who are the direct heirs and descendants based upon the inheritance that was left from our predecessors, which are our descendants, and that this is reserved for a family, okay? As you can see at the end of the scroll, the family was of those who descended from the Plantagenet crown, okay? Those who descended from the Plantagenet crown. And we know those who descended down from the Plantagenet crown are those who are descendants or preserved through what we call King Arthur. All right. So watch today's video and yesterday's video and make the correlation so you can be a part of the great estate that was left for a great people who goes back to what we call time immemorial. I hope you all enjoyed this lesson in regards to interpreting the MS or the manuscript Roll 1066, going back from Adam and Eve all the way up to Edward IV, which are the legitimacy in regards to the claim or the proof that we are, in fact, the children of God. And the only way that can be understood is that you accept who I am, which is called the Messiah, which we refer to here at the Third Temple English Church of England as my Lord. Okay? 2024, which is 2974 in the Berber year, is actually 5784, which is according to the creation story, the beginning, and the end. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen. I'll leave the floor open for any questions. If there's not, then we'll end this lesson and let you all build and download this marvelous lesson that I presented for you today. Okay, so are there any questions from the viewers or the chat line? Are there any questions from the chat line? Your donations, you can send it to the Third Tim England Church of England or $ Clifford Jefferson L. It's appreciated, as well as make sure if you do comment on the chat or comment on the actual text, make sure you give a full description or a full detail of what you learned in the video, and not just say the normal jargon that we usually hear or usually see in the chat line, or what we call the text. All right. So please leave an informative uh 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 determination of how you perceived and understood the video that was presented to you by your king, King Clifford Jefferson, the King of England and the King of Albion, as a result of me personifying and incarnating into that position which we call the Messiah, the Anointed. And with that, since I don't see any questions posted, I'll greet you as I meet you. And that's always in what we call peace and love.